of the presentation to give you a brief and accurate introduction to Ellen White, the person, and the ministry to the SDA Church, clarify the relationship between her writings and that of the Bible, and to show her importance to the SDA Church. Now, when you hear Ellen White, the truth is, within Adventism, many of us today have the wrong picture of Ellen White. I talk about two incorrect pictures, but truth be told, there are probably more than two incorrect pictures of Ellen White. There are those who, because of an unfortunate experience, there are those who have this picture of Ellen White like the one furthest away. You see that picture? They see Ellen White as this grumpy old lady with long fingers, and she looks around the congregation for anybody who is enjoying themselves in Jesus and points them and saying, "Oh dear, you shouldn't be doing this." Have you realized that you find within Adventism, for some strange reason, very often when you hear Ellen White, it is followed by Sister White says you should not. Ever notice that? Now, if we constantly present a negative with Ellen White, what happens? The picture that we portray is a caricature. It's not a real picture. So we ought to understand that Sister White is not the not. Right? Sister White said, don't do that. And what happens to, of course, there is Old Testament Apocrypha. There is New Testament Apocrypha. And within Adventism, there is Ellen White Apocrypha. What is Ellen White Apocrypha? Well, that is things that Ellen White never said, neither did it ever come to her mind, but somebody felt she should have said it. So what happens as a result? Well, they say, Sister White said it. I can't remember where, But I can't remember exact book and page, but I remember she said this, right? So very soon somebody's going to tell you, Sister White says, you should not read the Bible on your phone. Of course, there is what is called the vegetarian Virgin Mary view of Ellen White. A view that makes her other than human. No, that makes us uncomfortable. Because the thing about it is this. We read the Bible. We all read the Bible. And we see people in the Bible. And the Bible is very open and very honest when we read it. Right? We see David as a man after God's own heart, and David does what? He does some naughty stuff. Right? But he's still a man after God's own heart. We see in the Bible, we read about others of the prophets, and they too had their shortcomings. And we are comfortable with that. But we are not mentally comfortable with thinking of Ellen White having any shortcoming. Why? Because we are so far historically removed from the people in the Bible. The people in the Bible were century and millennia ago. We are far removed from them in time. But Ellen White, we are closer to her in time. And we tend to want to think that in order for her to be a prophet, she had to be a perfect person. But the truth is, Ellen White was not a perfect person. Amen? Ellen White was not a perfect person. That does not make her less a prophet. I have a general rule for those who are not familiar with me. When the water is done, so am I. But I normally use room temperature water. So I'll be finished and the water will be here still. Yeah. So coming back, we must always remember Ellen White was a real human being. What was she? A real human being. And just as the prophets in the Bible had their shortcomings, so should she. So the fact, you see what, let me share this with you, right? Sometimes you hear somebody say, Ellen White did this. And you say, no, Ellen White wouldn't have done such a thing. You know, and or somebody say, Ellen White used to eat pork. I said, no, Ellen White wouldn't eat pork. Adventists don't eat pork. Well, Ellen White used to eat pork. Right, she used to eat pork. And you know what she used to use? You ever, anybody here, before you became Adventist, anybody here ever bought oysters? Oysters? Ellen White loved oysters. While she was an Adventist, and while she was prophet, she loved oysters. And you know what's interesting too, Pastor Moses? She continued to eat oysters after 1863, when she had the first comprehensive health reform vision. People tell you these things. We are in the information age. You get those things on YouTube, you get these things on the internet, and you go and you say to yourself, oh my goodness, that means Ellen White is not a prophet. By the way, as I mentioned the oysters, let me just slip this in for you quickly, right? The understanding that we have today with regard to Leviticus 11, that didn't come normative within Adventism until about the turn of the 19th century, or the 19th into the 20th century. Just so that your hearts would be comforted. All right. Yeah. So that in 1863, no more Mr. Piggy, but they continued with some other things. The understanding of Leviticus 11, clean and unclean, that we have today, they did not have it there. I just had to slip that in here quickly. So, it's important to have the correct picture. Not a vegetarian Virgin Mary, not a caricature. The picture, what happens? Helps to form the subconscious backdrop of our approach to what she had to say. Subconsciously, the way we see her is based on the picture we have of her. You know something? And this is not something new. If there's a preacher preaching, right? And you see that preacher, I always remember the preacher who kept the evangelistic series when I got baptized, right? This Dr. Farr's good friend from Manson, and all up there. And even now, I like to hear the man preach. He mightn't be Barry Black, but I love to hear him preach. Why do I love to hear him preach so much? Because he's the one who preached when I accepted Jesus as my Savior. So that helped to form a picture. You follow? Now, if there's a preacher that offended you, or in time of your need, the pastor was not there for you, or he was flippant or callous with you, what happens? It forms a picture in your head. And when he's preaching, what happens? You're not hearing what he's saying because you're constantly remembering that unfortunate experience. So when we read Ellen White's writings, we must ensure that we are reading her with the correct picture of who she is. Not a vegetarian Virgin Mary, and not a caricature. Okay. Ellen White, she was born in Gorham, Maine. You ever been to Maine? No? Okay. Maine, if you're familiar with the map of the U.S., Eastern Seaboard, it's the state furthest to the north on the Eastern Seaboard, right? After Maine, you reach Canada. So she was born in Gorham. The family moved to Portland, Maine. You ever heard about Portland, Maine? Right. So the family moved to Portland, Maine. Actually, let me just slip this in here quickly for you. Ellen G. White. What's G for? Gould. Right. Interesting thing that you probably never heard before in your life. Do you know that the name Gould is actually her mother's family last name? Yeah. Gould. So if you should go to Portland, and go and check in the books there. You would see a lot of ghouls. There are still some of them around today, and that's Ellen White's relatives from her mother's side, the ghouls. All right. So you learned something that you never thought you were going to learn. One day as a young girl, she was walking from school, and you know when you were small, your parents always used to tell you, Pastor Hines, stone don't have eyes. When I pelt stone, they have eyes. Because when I pelt at mangoes, trust me, I pick them. You know, I still have my skills. Right. The other day I picked some Jep too. Speaking of which, this is just an aside. I had a very interesting experience, one that I never had before on Tuesday afternoon. Because when the earthquake struck, guess where I was? On top of a mango tree. Seriously, I was on the top of a mango tree. Was I excited, right? Yeah, yes, yeah. It was a new perspective. A new perspective. But coming back, so this classmate of hers took a stone and threw it at her, and this classmate probably was West Indian, accustomed to pelting mangoes, because she hit us direct, broke her nose bridge, and that caused her to be ill, and she actually ended school because of that. All right. As an early teen, she got baptized into the Methodist Church. It's interesting. Methodists allowed for two forms of baptism: a fusion or immersion. You know what's a fusion? You pour. And make sure this is close. Right? That's a fusion. And immersion is where you go down in the water and come back up. Ellen White, as an early teen, asked to be baptized by immersion and not by a fusion. So she was baptized in the sea in Portland, Maine. During the time of William Miller's preaching, her family got this fellowship from the Methodist Church. Because what happens is that there were those churches that felt that they were okay with Miller filling their churches, but when the time to 1844 came closer, they weren't okay with them anymore, so they showed them the door. One of the interesting things that also happened at that time is that Ellen White had a twin sister, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth was supposed to be baptized just about that time, but she was not baptized. And they were thrown out of the Methodist Church. And unfortunately, she was never baptized. And Ellen White prayed and did all she could for her. But she never became a committed Christian. The twin sister of the prophet. Yeah. So there was this fellowship. 1844 comes and goes, and Ellen White, along with other Milleritic Adventists, would have experienced the disappointment. But God has a way of doing things, and He moved her from disappointment to appointment. That is why I say you see my caption there? Everything I do it with a purpose, you know. The disappointment. I make it two separate words. Alright? Alright? She moved from being disappointed to being appointed. It was December of 1844. And she's at a prayer meeting. And while at that prayer meeting, she had her first of many visions. I will give you the synopsis of the vision, because that vision formed the backdrop of Adventism even up to today. And forgive me if I take a little too long with it. If you should go online anytime, you could look up the picture, the painting, Christ of the Narrow Way by Nathan Green. It is based on Ellen White's first vision. All right? Now, in this vision, she is looking for the Advent people. Who are the Advent people? Those who are following the teachings of William Miller. She's looking for the Advent people, and then a voice says to her, look a little higher. Now, as she looks a little higher, right? She looks a little higher. I see one of my past students here, and he's looking at me, so I might ask him to come and help explain, right? Brother Davis? Right. I make out my students, and they, as long as I taught you in school, you should be able to remember it. So she's looking for the Advent people. She's told to look a little higher. And they are on this narrow path going up to the kingdom. At the back of them, there is a light. And at the head of them, of course, is the city with Jesus. And then the angel says to her that that light is the midnight cry. Now, what is the midnight cry? The midnight cry is the understanding that Jesus was going to return on October 22, 1844. Now, why do I have to say this? Because one of the unfortunate things that is happening today within Adventism is that there are those of us who want to discard October 22, 1844. We don't want to associate with it because it's embarrassing. But the truth be told, when God showed Ellen White that vision, he says, this light is the midnight cry. Now, what happens next? Some along the path, guess what happened? They rejected the light. And when they rejected the light, there was darkness at their feet and they fell off the path. But there were those who did what? They kept the light. And let me just bring it home a little closer, Pastor Frank. In December of 1844, right, after the disappointment, there's fragmentation within Millerite Adventism. But there is no group yet called Sabbatarian Adventists in December of 1844. There's no group like that yet, right? And when we come to 1845, you begin to have Sabbatarian Adventists, guess what? They're just a few. But there were other groups that came out of Millerite Adventism, and they were very large. But soon enough, they rejected October 22, 1844. If you would have looked at the groups coming out of Millerite Adventism in 1845, 1846, and you had to ask yourself the question, which one is most likely to survive and thrive, you will probably say the Evangelical Adventists or the Advent Christians. But guess what? Evangelical Adventists disbanded by 1859. Advent Christians, they are still around today, but there are probably about 3,000 of them in the world. Sabbatarian Adventists who became Seventh-day Adventists, if you looked at them in 1846, there were just a few of them. But today we have over 20 million of them. What makes the difference? What makes the difference? Because they kept the light. They did not reject the light. God has always been leading this church. The more I see that God is really in charge of things, you know, God is really in charge, right? Pastor Moses knows that. Yeah, he was my supervisor, so I know him well. God is really in charge. All right, good. I have to move on a little faster. I have to watch time. All right. Ellen White got married to James White in 1846. They had 4 children. One of them died as a baby. He actually didn't have a name when he died. He lived for just about 3 months and then died. And then her first son, he died as a teenager. but two of them lived to adulthood. James Edson White, who was the naughty boy in the family. You know, all families have a naughty boy. I have to say these things, you know, because sometimes we think to ourselves, as Christians, we shouldn't have naughty children. Well, we shouldn't have naughty children, but if you have a naughty child, that doesn't mean you're not a Christian. Are you with me? Ellen White and James White had struggles with James Edson White. He was a real naughty boy, right? And he had a very interesting conversion experience when he was in his 40s, in the early 1890s. He was sitting in church one day, listening to what he called a not too particularly interesting sermon. And while listening to this not too particularly interesting sermon, the thought came to his head, you know, I've been in this thing all my life, and I've never really been serious about it. You know, maybe it might make sense one day to become serious. Yeah, I think that'll make sense. You know, come in to think of it. If it will make sense to do it one day, then I could do it today. And right there, while listening to a not too particularly interesting sermon, he had his conversion experience. The moral of the story is, even though sometimes the preacher might be preaching a not too particularly interesting sermon, God still works. Amen? The other moral of the story is, preachers preach particularly interesting sermons, please. Thank you very much. If you're familiar with your hymnal, hymn number 281, I Gave My Life for Thee, that was written by James Edson White, the son of James and Ellen White. And then, of course, the other son she had was Willie White, William Clarence White, and he worked closely together with his mother until she died. After James White died in 1881, Willie was the guy who was always there working along with his mother, all right, all the way until she died. James White died in 1881, and Ellen White, they were married in 1846. Who is good with mathematics? How many years that's? 1846 to 1881 gave you how many years? 35. And she died in 1915. So how many years she lived as a widow? 29? No, 19 and 15, 34 thereabouts. Right. But you see something I said? She was a widow by choice and not chance. Right. Yeah, I have something here to tell you. Right. Did you know, some of you know this, but most of you probably don't. Did you know that someone proposed to Ellen White? When Ellen White was over in Australia, in the 1890s, she got a proposal, right? Someone asked her to have her hand in marriage, all right? And this is how I always portray it. This is not how it went down, but I portray it this way. She said, I am a prophet, so I saw that coming. But the person who asked her, he wasn't a prophet. So he didn't see the response what that was going to come. You ever heard about anybody other than Ellen G. White? Guess what happened to him? He got blank. Yeah. Who was that, by the way? Stephen Haskell. Stephen Haskell. If you should ever see a picture of Ellen White's funeral, you would see him there at the funeral. Yeah, Stephen Haskell. Just had to slip that one in there quickly, right? Ellen White, in terms of her family, let me just say this other thing here. Within the family, at times, after around 1863 thereof, James White got a number of strokes, right? He was the cricketer. He had a lot of strokes. And what happened is that he was at times difficult to work with. Now, generally speaking, James White was a very bull-headed guy, right? He was the kind of guy, if he said, this is how it is, that is how it is, right? And it doesn't make sense arguing. That is how it is. I remember arguing with my father when I was a little fella, and my father said SALT is salt. That could never be salt. I'm serious, all right? Bless his heart. He said that is salt. You need, for it to be salt, you have to put in a U. It has to be SAULT. And it didn't make sense arguing with him. He's right. All right? As far as he was concerned, you can have a paper bag or a plastic paper bag. Right? Don't argue. If he wants a plastic paper bag, give it to him. All right? So these kind of guys, these strong-headed guys, we sometimes have them in church too. Still. We still have them in church. They don't leave. Right? When one goes off the scene, there are 5 more waiting to come in. All right? So James White was that kind of guy. And sometimes there were 2 occasions particularly where they were on separate itineraries. James White was in the west and Ellen White was in the east. And that, not that they had separated, but they were working in separate places. Right? They didn't separate, but they were working in separate places. I just need to let you know that, right? And at one time, Ellen White was writing to James, and I have to give you a little more background. If you should ever go to the historic Adventist village in Battle Creek, Michigan, you'd realize that when you go upstairs in the White House there was a little, by the step, there was a little room there that was James White's room. That's where he would sleep. Why would he sleep in that little room? Because Ellen White would at times, oftentimes actually, be writing late in night in the bedroom, because they didn't have an office to do that. So she would be writing in the bedroom. And James wants to sleep, right? So he would sleep in this little room, right? It's not an arrangement that I would want to have, but it's an arrangement that they had at times. But coming back to the story. So when it's time to sleep, well, of course, James would go and sleep, I think. And James White and Ellen White, they're in separate places, working separate itineraries. And Ellen White writes to him, Pastor Frank, and she says to him how much she misses him. And she also misses, little children, close your ears, his little nighttime visits to her bedchamber. You get the point, right? You get the point. Someone was surprised some time back to hear that Ellen White had children. I thought that they were adopted, or they fell from the sky, the stork bring them or something. All right? I'm serious. Yeah, I didn't make that up. All right. She had 2 international mission trips, 1885 to 87. She went to Europe, 1881 to 1900. She was in Australia. She went down under. During the time in Australia is when she was instrumental in the establishment of what was called then Avondale School for Christian Workers, which is currently called Avondale College. Right? Ellen White, in terms of a ministry to the Adventist Church. Now, between the years 1845 to 1847, the core doctrines of Seventh-day Adventists were hammered out. The basis of the doctrines was what? The study of the Bible and not the visions of Ellen White. Let me say this again. The basis of the doctrines was what? The study of the Bible. And not what? The visions of Ellen White. Not a single Seventh-day Adventist doctrine is based on the visions of Ellen White. We should be happy about that. You know, sometimes people accuse us as Adventists, and unfortunately, some of us don't know, right, for one reason or another. Sometimes people accuse us of believing certain doctrines based on Ellen White's visions and writings, but that is not so. It never was, is not now, and shall never be. Amen? Amen? And if perchance you have established a doctrine that is based not on the Bible, but on the writings of Ellen White exclusively, then you would be using Ellen White's writings in a manner in which she strenuously resisted. Say it again. If you should have established a doctrine, wherever you may be, whenever, based exclusively on what? The writings of Ellen White, and not on the Bible, then you would be using her writings in a manner contrary to that which she said it should be used. You know, sometimes the ones closest to you are the ones who treat you the worst. And some of those who claim to love Ellen White so much abuse her the most. And one of the worst form of abuse is to use her to say things she never said, or establish doctrines she never established. All right? Study of the Bible. The visions help to confirm. Help to do what? Confirm that which was already apprehended by diligent Bible study, and at times to make some areas clearer. Now, let me share something here quickly. When Joseph Bates first shared the Sabbath doctrine with James White and Ellen Harmon, they weren't yet married, in 1846, they rejected it. What did they do? They rejected it. Wait. If she's a prophet, isn't she supposed to accept it immediately? No. She doesn't have to accept it immediately. But what happens after? They went and they studied it. Where? From the Bible. And as a result of studying it, accepted it. From the Bible. And then accepted it. And we would also recognize, and I just have to slip this in here quickly, we'd also recognize that when we look at Adventism and we look at Adventist doctrine, we here today in what year is it? What year is it? 2018. We have a full body of doctrines as Adventists, right? The pioneers, the body of doctrines we have today, they did not have it. It was forming, right? And within Adventism, there is always this progressive understanding of truth. And I always like to say it that way. I don't ever say truth is progressive. Truth is truth. Our understanding is progressive. So there's this progressive understanding of truth. You know, what does the Bible say? The path of the just is like the shining light that shines more and more onto what? The perfect day. So as we advance, we grow to know more, and we learn more, and we learn more, and we learn more. Truth, our understanding of it ever advancing. So we should understand this, that as we go through time, right? Not everything that we have today, they had then, right? So I mentioned about the oysters in Leviticus 11. Remember that? We have that today. But they didn't always have that. Right? So Ellen White's visions help to confirm that which was already accepted. And it also helped to make some areas clearer. In other words, what happens is this, is at times the brethren will be there and they will be studying, sometimes for the whole night, the entire night. They spend studying on a topic. And at times, they may meet a bit of an impasse. You know? Because I might be seeing it this way, and you might be seeing it that way. Right? A bit of an impasse. But it's based on what? Study of the Bible. And sometimes Ellen White would have had visions that would help to clarify that which they were studying. Right? But not to initiate it. Right? To clarify it. I was so happy this evening when I heard you all singing, "Give Me the Bible." Yeah. Give me the Bible. All right? So the pillar doctrines, of course, we're familiar with them. I had planned to talk about each one for a bit, but I'm not going to do that. Second coming of Christ. State of the dead. You know the 4 S's? Sanctuary doctrine and what? 7-day Sabbath. Right? So let me just say this quickly. If we look at them, second coming, they were Millerite Adventists. So guess what? They already had that. State of the dead. I'll just give you a quick synopsis. State of the dead. That was introduced into Millerite Adventism by George Storrs. And later on, Charles Switch also accepted it. Ellen White would have been exposed to it via her mother. James White and Joseph Bates, they belong to the Christian Connection. And Christian connection is rejected the idea of the immortality of the soul. So interesting thing is this. The 3 founders of Seventh-day Adventism, James White, Ellen White, and Joseph Bates, they all already had an understanding that when you die, guess what? You're dead. Right? Soul sleep. Sanctuary doctrine. Sanctuary doctrine, that understanding came as a result of extensive study being done by O.R.L. Crozier. Who else? Pastor Hines. Yeah, put you on the spot. F.B. Han, Dr. F.B. Han. We have a bit of input from Hiram Edson as well, right? And there were others like G.W. Peavy and Emily Clemens and so on, studying of this whole issue of the sanctuary doctrine. And the 7-day Sabbath, what is introduced into Adventism via the 7-day Baptists. And the man who became the apostle of the Sabbath was Joseph Bates, right? So when we look at that, we realize, guess what? Ellen White wasn't at the forefront in any of them. None of them. All right? But although Ellen was not an initiator and vision for secondary to scripture and study, her role was still necessary and what? Important. Still necessary and important. All right. Some of the other things I have to say will be covered in Dr. Faz's presentation, so I would finish probably after this slide. In terms of a ministry to the Adventist Church, there is what is called the Adventist Quadrilateral, right? A big word. The acronym HOPE. You ever heard the acronym HOPE? Health, Organization, Publishing, Education. But in terms of chronological order, it's publishing. Come on, Miguel. You did that just the other day. Publishing. Declan. Publishing followed by, you all man make you out. Publishing first, what came second? Pastor Hines? Pastor Frank? I was giving you a blind because you long time ago. Publishing, then organization, then Chronological order. Then what? Health. Publishing. Ellen White gets a vision, 1848. She tells her husband, James White, you must begin to print a paper. It will be small at first, right? But it will be a success from the start. And from this little paper, what is going to happen? It's going to be as streams of light circling the globe. But guess what? It's just a few Adventists at a time. Just a few of them. But you know what's the reality today? We have Adventist publications all over the world. And guess what? In most of the territories in the Caribbean, the printed page came before the walking missionary. Right? So, instrumental in that. In terms of organizational development, in the 1850s, James White recognizing, because what happens after these guys are kicked out of the churches, they had this view that organization was Babylon. Babylon vampiristic systems. So they don't want organization. But James White was saying we need to have organization. We need gospel order. Gospel order is important. It's necessary. And Ellen White supports him in that call for gospel order. And then we have in 1860, October, what happened in October of 1860? The name Seventh-day Adventist was chosen. And then in May of 18... I have to stop teaching, boy. If these people I teach not remembering anything. May of 1863, we have the first general conference. Boy, I have to give you guys a new exam. May 1863, right? What happens next? We have health. June 1863, June the 6th, at the home of Aaron Hilliard in Otsego, Michigan. Ellen White has her first comprehensive health reform vision. And it was necessary and it was needed at the time because a lot of the Adventist leaders were sick. Right? They were eating unhealthy stuff. They were living unhealthy lifestyles. And they were, well, I mean, the truth be told, the health practices of the day weren't all that healthy. Right? You wouldn't want to live in those days, you know. Huh? Listen, you wouldn't want to live in those days. Right? You know, sometimes you're traveling in a maxi, not the maxi driven by the people from Darby Church. Alright? Or anyway, La Hoqueta or anything like that. You're traveling in a maxi, right? Going down the bus route. Nobody's going to smoke a cigarette in the maxi. That's not going to happen. But guess what? In those days, you're traveling on a train. Fellas smoking cigarette. They're chewing tobacco. They have a spittoon across the room, across the carriage, sorry. And they're pretending to be Steph Curry. But not all of them good at it. So guess what? Some of them off with their aim, motto and pledge. And the spit fall all over the place. Not a pretty time to be living. Right? But Ellen White advocated for health. And guess what? Today, Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists, who live in accordance with our health principles, guess what? We live longer and healthier than the general population. Let me just emphasize this here, because unfortunately, more and more the world is recognizing the better lifestyle is what kind of lifestyle? A vegetarian lifestyle. Unfortunately, more and more Adventists are going after the flesh pots of Egypt. I have to say it because it's the truth. Right. Yeah. Health. And then education. Ellen White was fervent in advocating for education. Published a pamphlet in 1872. And then that same year we have the first Adventist education system becoming a reality. And today, guess what? Adventists, among all Protestants, Adventists have the widest education network in the world. You didn't know that? The only religion that has a wider network of schools than Adventists is Roman Catholic. And here's something else. Here's something else that you didn't know. Streams of light around the world. The Christian denomination that is found in the most countries in the world is what? Yes, tell me. Seventh-day Adventists. Is what? Seventh-day Adventists are found in more countries in the world than any other Christian denomination. Praise the Lord. So the visions, the role, the function, the ministry of Ellen White, it's not something to be taken lightly, because they have helped to form this church in the sense of guiding and leading this church, and they will continue to lead us. Those who follow them prosper. But without a vision, the people perish. Thank you very much.